Hey guys, I know I'm going to get a reputation for being obsessed with this individual, but unfortunately they just uploaded a video that I couldn't resist called Trans Guy Reacts to Peak Trans. The whole idea of being peak trans is very much associated with the feminist women's rights gender critical movement. So I thought, seeing as that's something I cover quite a lot, I would just talk about what is said here. And I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you don't mind the fact that I've been going to this individual quite a lot for content. Because, yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, I subscribed. You know, when people like give me ideas about people I might want to respond to, a lot of the time I'll kind of subscribe to them so that I can see if they've uploaded anything, and if I see something interesting, I respond. So here we go, that's what I'm doing right now.
Today we're having another look at some funny things that transphobes have said, just some strange, nonsensical arguments from...
Has Jammidodger ever engaged like a gender critical person in debate? Because he seems to be very confident the arguments are strange and nonsensical, but I've never ever seen Jammidodger defend the ideas of gender identity extremism in an open and honest debate. I mean, I think that Jammidodger's ideas are quite strange and nonsensical, and the arguments that, I mean, insofar as arguments are presented for the ideas of gender identity extremism on this channel, I have not found them to be convincing. And therefore, you know, any time that Jammy wants an open and honest discussion, I'll be happy to have that, because I believe that it will be clear at the end of it who has the nonsensical arguments.
This episode is called Peak Trans. I have no idea what I'm going to call this video because I have no idea what peak trans is.
Good. It's a good attitude to go into a video with complete ignorance about the terminology that is being used. I mean, to be fair, it just shows how little Jammy actually knows about gender critical ideas, because peak trans is a very common idea amongst gender critical movements. So this is basically what Jammy's doing, is telling on himself in a massive way. This would be like if I mean, you know, this is a slightly exaggerated example, but it would be like if I, somebody who spends a lot of time talking about gender identity politics, came out and said, oh, I don't know what gender dysphoria is. You know, I mean, maybe that's maybe true scum. Okay, let's say true scum. If I just came out and said, oh, I've never heard of true scum, I don't know what true scum means, well, that would make me look pretty silly, wouldn't it? So the fact that Jammy is coming out and being like, I've never heard of this peak trans idea, well, you're just telling on yourself and showing how ignorant you are, and showing how you are really in no position to talk about this issue until you've actually educated yourself just the tiniest amount.
Definition: peak trans, the breaking point at which one realises that they can no longer support the extremism of gender identity ideology. In other words, the point at which somebody decides to be transphobic.
Okay, so basically this is, I mean, obviously Jammy's just stolen a definition, so that is an accurate definition. I made a video a while ago called My Mum Hit Peak Trans, and the basic story there was that my mum had recently found out that somebody who at her work, who used to make very kind of inappropriate comments to her, you know, like comments of a sexual nature, had come out as a trans woman. And my mum was basically saying she felt uncomfortable knowing that somebody who had made her feel uncomfortable in the past with inappropriate comments was now identifying themselves as a woman and basically claiming the label of womanhood for themselves. And that's the kind of example, I think that's a example of peak trans that lots of people experience. I should say, by the way, I think that men don't really experience peak trans as much, which I think makes sense, because transgender identity ideology is way more harmful to women than it is to men. I mean, I would argue it is harmful to anybody in the... Obviously, intellectual honesty is an important thing. Being able to challenge and question bad ideas is an important thing. And obviously, gender identity extremism cannot stand up to scrutiny, so it denies people the ability to have honest, open conversations about it. So that is harmful to anybody insofar as it's harmful to living in a free and open democratic society in general. So in that sense, it's obviously bad, but unsurprisingly, that's not the kind of thing you necessarily experience in a peak trans kind of sense. You know, for a lot of women, I think they do have that one moment where they realize that gender identity extremism, this idea that, you know, gender or your being a man or a woman is not determined by your biology or anything to do with your meaningful lived experience, but rather just your identity. a lot of people will have a moment, a lot of women will have a moment where they realize how harmful that is to them as women. Now, in my case, like I said, I did not have a peak trans moment. The closest I could say I got is back in 2017. I made a video where I basically said that gender critical feminists are wrong, but we should be listening to and engaging with their ideas. And I got a long-time subscriber replying and saying to me, you're like guilty of murdering trans people because you think that we should engage gender critical people in honest and open discussion. And to be honest, you know, the issue is though that it was actually a long period of me listening to women and understanding their arguments that led to me to this point. And I think that's probably the reason why men tend not to have a peak trans moment, because for most men, the reason they're going to arrive at a gender critical idea is just by listening to women and listening to their experiences. So yeah, basically, it's not surprising to me that lots of women have a peak trans moment, and I personally did not have a peak trans moment. But I suppose actually maybe to try and educate Jammidodger, if you're watching this right now, you can perhaps, if you're a woman, and maybe if you're a man and you want to kind of prove me wrong and say actually you're a man and you did have a peak trans moment, but comment below your peak trans moment, you know, for the algorithm, but also because I think it might genuinely be useful to help Jammidodger understand this whole peak trans thing. I also just want to deal with the claim, I believe it was, that people decide to become bigots. I think it shows how kind of little you're willing to understand just human psychology and people disagreeing with you in general, because there must be a point at which you realize, well, hold on a minute, if for a lot of people there is a moment where suddenly things click, surely that suggests that these people are not just intrinsically bigoted. I would argue that bigotry usually is something which forms in a very kind of subconscious sense. Like, I think we can all agree on that. Nobody decides suddenly to become bigoted. People usually slowly kind of grow up with bigoted attitudes, and it will be a matter of kind of slowly overcoming them or failing to overcome them if they remain bigoted. I'd say most people don't just have a, you know, like, oh, I hate black people, I hate gay people. There we go. You know, people, when they have genuine bigotry, it's not something that forms out of one particular instance. I mean, that's kind of what the movie Crash, where it's just like, I hate black people because of affirmative action. That's like, it's never that simplistic. The thing with peak trans is that the reason why people have a peak trans moment is not because of bigotry, but because they actually have a moment where they realize, you know, the reality of the situation, that this idea that gender is determined by identity to the exclusion of biology is actually incredibly harmful for women. And yeah, so they have that moment where they encounter reality. It's not a moment where they just decide to become bigoted. And the fact that you would choose to frame it that way and say, oh, it's just people deciding to become bigoted, shows not only that you don't understand gender critical ideas, but you also don't seem to understand bigotry as a social phenomenon or human psychology in general. So that's a quite impressive broad degree of things you don't understand there.
There's no like, this has got too extreme for my liking, I'm going to move on. Like, trans people are just being heard more in society, and if that is too much for people who don't like trans people to bear, and they're now going to try and come up with fancy terms to try and justify it to themselves, and that is fine.
Okay, again, so essentially what we get here is one, being confused about the idea that people might realize that gender identity extremism has gone too far. I mean, even again, for me, I kind of had actually an example of that, of course, of realizing it had gone too far. When I'm being told that I am guilty of murdering trans people because I think it's important to just have a discussion where we actually listen to the things gender critical feminists are saying and, you know, refute them. I mean, this was at a point when I was not a gender critical feminist. I just thought that we should listen to what they were saying so that we could actually show that they are wrong. It was only later on I realized, actually, oh wait, when you listen to the things they're saying, you can't show they're wrong. But at the time, I was just saying, hey, you know, I've heard what they're saying, and it's, you know, at least worth having a discussion about. And I was told that was murdering trans people. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty extreme. And it's not trans people are being heard more. It's trans people are saying stupid things which are incredibly radical, things which are intended to shut down debate through emotional appeals. You know, it's just so wrong-headed to say it's just trans people being heard more that's the problem. No, and people aren't inventing terms. Like I say, peak trans, it's an actual thing that exists. It's an actual phenomenon. It's not the case of the normal kind of moderate trans person who breaks the camel's back, what usually causes peak trans is an example of somebody who is extreme, somebody who does something which really has a big impact on somebody. So yeah, basically you're just completely wrong to characterize it as, oh, it's just, too many trans people and that causes people to reject gender identity extremism.
Peak trans, honestly, I don't know what you were thinking, but to me that reads as something that's maybe a little bit more like trans-friendly.
I don't get this though, because I would assume that Jammy is about my age and grew up somewhere close to where I grew up, and where I was growing up, the word peak was always understood to be like a bad thing. Like if you said, oh, that's peak, that just meant like to the point that just saying something was peak just in general just meant like a bad thing. So I don't know how detached. Maybe this explains why Jammy did not know what the word peak trans means. Maybe Jammy has been actively involved in the debate around gender identity, but just is very bad at picking up terms and what they mean. Because yeah, peak being a bad thing is not a new phenomenon.
Let's stop using the word trans women. Trans-identified men are men. It's just outright transphobia. They have no right to put it on a pretty background.
Again, saying like that the use of the word trans women is a problem is completely legitimate. Trans women, like I say, it's completely unneutral language. I pointed this out before. It's implying that woman is a thing that can be transitioned to, which I do not believe. It's also saying that so-called trans women are women, which I disagree with. So yeah, basically, I mean, obviously trans-identified men is also not neutral. So that's why I would prefer trans-identified males, because that just talks about their biology. Which is something which most people should be able to agree on. Obviously, there are crazy people who don't agree with that, but the good thing is if you kind of force them to come out and admit they don't agree with that, you can then point out that yes, these people are denying biology. So for that reason, I would say using terms like trans-identified male or trans-identified female is very useful. So yeah, and certainly the term trans woman, yeah, I can understand why people would not want to use that. And I generally try to avoid using it. Not always, sometimes I do just say it, but certainly a lot of the time I'll say so-called trans women and things like that, because yeah, I don't believe there is such a thing as an actual trans woman, because I don't believe women is something you can be transitioned to, and I don't believe that so-called trans women are actually women.
It just sounds really silly to me, because trans women are women, and that's it. No matter how much you argue against that, it doesn't make it any less real.
Okay, here's the thing, you have not argued for the position at all though. It's like this is how silly these people are. Like, it's kind of just difficult to deal with somebody who their entire attitude is they are angry that they're having to defend their ideas. So their response is just to kind of awkwardly act as if other people are being unreasonable, and then go, well, obviously trans women are women, obviously men with penises are women. It's just obvious. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't realize that someone has a penis and testicles and XY chromosome and secondary male sex characteristics, but they're a woman because they say so. How can you not realize that? Like, you're an idiot. I don't get it. Like, how can you... You aren't the person with the intuitively obvious belief here. Like, here's the thing. If you're going to believe in this whole gender identity extremism thing, at least have the kind of basic dignity to present it in some kind of esoteric, academic, theoretical way, where we can all kind of say, okay, at least they're actually trying. But just to come out and act as if you have the intuitively obvious belief and just be like, well, obviously gender is determined by identity. Everyone understands that. Makes you look just not only stupid, but lazy. Okay.
Trans is a spectrum. Well, gender reassigned transsexuals, genuine gender dysphoria sufferers, cross-dressers, sports cheats and other chancers, autogynephiles and fetishists, predatory men. I don't even know what to say, it's just so wrong. Are they trying to call predatory men trans in some way? And
well, I guess what it's pointing out is that seeing as the term trans isn't clearly defined and can mean lots of different things depending on who you ask, yeah, any of those groups of people could potentially be included under the label of trans, and also perceptibly you can't tell the difference between those different groups of people. You know, you can't tell the difference between a predatory man and, I don't know, an autogynephile or something like that. You know, there's no way to necessarily tell the difference immediately, and therefore from the perspective of a woman who's interested in her own safety, certainly it makes sense that they would all just appear on a similar spectrum. I don't agree with characterizing it as a spectrum. I think, you know, the idea that these are positions on the spectrum, I think is wrong, because I think ultimately it implies that there is a one singular phenomenon that you can have to varying extents. Whereas I don't really agree with that. I think it's ultimately, we're dealing with fundamentally different things, and that's always been my position, and it's one reason why I don't like kind of the language of gender identity extremism, which kind of just uses the generic term trans. Like, I think there's lots of different reasons why people might be gender non-conforming, and of course there's the fact that there are people who are gender non-conforming who do not identify as trans. So for me, it's just like there's loads of different phenomena going on, and to try and kind of group them all together, I think just leads to confusion unnecessarily. So yeah, that's kind of my position. I don't agree with characterizing it as a spectrum, but insofar as it's saying, yes, these are all things that exist and can happen, and that women maybe can be concerned about, yeah, what's the issue there?
I don't understand this. It's so rude. Trans people are trans people. Ta-da!
Yeah, see, this is the exact thing that I don't like. Trans people are trans people? Again, it's just grouping. The issue is it's taking a very complicated phenomenon. And this is the thing that I always go back to. Like, my attitude has always been that gender and sex, and especially even like ideas of masculinity and femininity, ideas of male and female, ideas of man and woman, I've always been willing to accept that they are complicated. I mean, even if we say that there is one clear defining thing for sex, like gamete production, it's still true that there's lots of other things going on, obviously, secondary sex characteristics, genitals, things like that. You know, my attitude has always been that everything going on, and also sexuality, by the way, it is complicated. And it's not true to say that everything needs to be put into these neat little simplistic boxes. The issue I have with gender identity extremism is that's precisely what it does by just saying, oh, trans is trans. Well, no, there's loads of complexity to it beyond that. And the fact that you feel threatened by people pointing out that complexity, the fact you feel threatened by people pointing out that there is a massive diversity of reasons why somebody might present themselves as transgender, ranging from autogynephilia to, you know, being a transgender, to maybe even some kind of psychological phenomenon relating to how they were raised with regards to gender stereotypes. Obviously, there's then, of course, gender dysphoria, things like that. The fact that you are unwilling to entertain the idea that there is some complexity to gender just shows that you are kind of afraid of this idea of things being maybe a bit more sophisticated, a bit more complex than the simple categories you try to put things into, where you just say trans is trans. Yeah, it just makes you come across as really silly.
Trans woman, noun, adult human male performing femininity.
I guess I'll agree right now that that's not exactly true, because lots of so-called trans women do not perform femininity. So, and also it should be pointed out that as a definition, it doesn't really work, because there's lots of adult human males who do perform femininity, and that's perfectly fine, and they don't call themselves trans women. So actually, I guess I will say that I disagree with this image, because I think, yeah, there are plenty of human males who perform femininity, and they are not trans women, and obviously there's kind of a denigrating tone to this image based on the kind of context. So, you know, I don't agree with that. I would say, you know, a trans woman, I mean, it's an adult human male pretending to or claiming to be a woman, which is still wrong. But yeah, I guess I'm going to say that I disagree with it. Now let's see what inferior reason Jammy offers for disagreeing with it.
That is not the definition. They literally just made up their own little dictionary entry on.
Okay, I mean, that's not quite as compelling of a reason to disagree with it as my reason, but I mean, sure, just saying that's not the definition. That's not the definition. See, this is what I hate about this. Like, I do a better job at arguing against this stuff than the people who, you know, make videos arguing against this stuff. Like, for me, I feel like I'm much better at pointing out kind of harmful ideas in the gender critical movement, because there are harmful ideas, just as there are in any movement, harmful ideas in gender critical movement like that. I do think it is harmful to kind of cast suspicion on males who perform femininity, because I think lots of males might do that for, you know, reasons which are perfectly legitimate, and as long as they're not claiming that performing that femininity makes them a woman, I don't see the issue there. You know, I think there can be issues, but I don't think there's intrinsically an issue. Obviously, I can agree with the idea that like drag queens and stuff, you can make an argument that's offensive, but obviously there's lots of other examples where a male performing femininity is perfectly legitimate. But yeah, The point being that here we just get, oh, that's not the definition. Presumably, I don't know, like an appeal to the dictionary.
Trans, special, and sexist. Can someone please explain this whole, like, trans people are sexist thing?
Yeah, it's not very difficult. Just watch the last video I did and you will understand it. Like, I don't even need to, I guess I'll leave a link to it now. Yeah, just watch that video. I pretty much cover the whole thing in detail, going through, like, you don't really need to watch anything else. Just watch that video. I guess I'll interrupt and kind of just deal with the rest of it. So basically, the first things first is that, yeah, saying more than male/female is wrong, because there is not more than male/female. There is a pretty pronounced sex binary, and also significantly, this is applying male and female, which relates to sex, with the categories of cis and trans and gender fluid, which even according to gender identity extremist logic relates to identity, not sex. So it's another example of trans people denying the existence of sex, gender identity extremists denying the existence of sex by acting as if sex is determined by identity. And as for gender fluid, yeah, obviously gender fluid is even more sexist. Like, have you ever listened to a gender fluid person try to talk about themselves in any way that is not sexist? Like, I would argue gender fluid is the most sexist, because it's just like, hell, it's like, oh, sometimes I feel like wearing pink, sometimes I feel like wearing blue. You know, I mean, it's not always that simplistic, but yeah, usually when you actually say, like, well, what does it mean? What is it, you feel like a man, sometimes like a woman, sometimes what does it mean? They will almost always present it in terms of sexist gender roles when you actually try to push down to the nitty gritty of what they're actually saying, which is the issue. The only way that gender identity extremism can actually kind of stand up is if it just avoid saying anything committal at all, because the minute they start saying committal things, they start saying profoundly sexist things.
I've heard it from several transphobic people, and I don't understand it. Non-binary, sexist, and very, very, very self-absorbed. I'm just gone.
Yeah, okay, so I'm just gonna, like, I didn't realize there was gonna be other stuff too. Yeah, I pretty much agree with it. Like, you know, obviously it's a joke, so you can't take it that far. Like, obviously it's not supposed to be some serious gender critical analysis. But yeah, it's generally true that a lot of people who say, like, oh, I'm non-binary, like, it's just very narcissistic and just a way of, like, saying, like, oh, I'm different, when it doesn't mean anything. Like, it's actually just a meaningless term. Basically, the reason why lots of people feel like when somebody's saying they're non-binary, they're just going, oh, I'm different, I'm special, is because literally, seeing as the term non-binary has no clear meaning, because it does not relate in any way to material reality, literally that is all they're saying. Like, you've basically just invented a label that means nothing just so you can say, oh, label.
Sexist, 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 with no basis whatsoever. Oh, and then just...
See, again, this is where it really bites you in the butt that you have admitted up front that you've never heard of the term peak trans, because it shows already that you have never ever actually engaged with gender critical discourse, because if you did, you would know the term peak trans. So the problem is you're just going, I don't understand anything they're saying. They're not offering up any arguments. You're basically responding to a meme page without actually understanding the underlying theory. You understand that theory isn't communicated through memes, right? Like that memes, like, I wouldn't go onto a socialist memes subreddit and try and learn about socialism from that. The point is, memes, if you want to shut down memes, that's fine. I genuinely don't mind people shutting down memes. I think it's a perfectly fine thing to do. But in order to shut down memes, you actually have to understand the underlying theories behind the memes. You can't just go, you can't just go like, hey guys, we're going to be reacting to some gender critical, or sorry, transphobic memes, and then literally every single reaction is just, well, I don't understand the theory underpinning this. Well, if you don't understand the theory, why are you reacting? Like, this is literally, you know, I know there was a channel, they don't really do this as much anymore, but there used to be a channel called What Do You Meme? And they were like a Christian channel that would react to kind of memes relating to religion. But the key thing is, like, the idea was they would often point out kind of misconceptions and like faulty ideas that were evidenced through the meme. Like, maybe there would be a meme that represents some kind of misunderstanding of, you know, atheism or a particular religious doctrine or something like that. And they would just be like, oh yeah, it doesn't really make sense. I thought it was like an interesting idea for a channel. So, you know, I saw them recommended one time. I watched it. I was like, oh, this is an interesting idea for a channel. But the key thing is that they went into it already understanding the underlying kind of theology relating to the issue. So they were able to say, oh, this is kind of misrepresenting the situation this way. What you've done is basically the exact same thing, but you're going into it. You're going into the discussion. You're going into this, analysis. Oh, God, can I just get some, I need some bigger fingers for the quote marks necessary there, but some analysis where you don't actually understand the theory by your own admission. You don't understand the theory. And then every single clip is just you going, oh, here's a meme. Here's a meme. Oh, I don't understand why they're saying this. Well, if you don't understand why they're saying this, why are you even bothering doing this? Why don't you actually engage with gender critical ideas, establish establish one, what they are, because you don't seem to understand that, and then two, why you disagree with them. Because all you're doing right now is just going through the memes and just going, well, I don't see why that's the case. Of course you don't. You haven't bothered to learn anything. Imagine if I did this. Imagine if every single video was just me going hey guys, today we're going to be reacting to transgender memes. Now, let me just clarify, I don't know anything about transgender ideas. I don't know anything about queer theory. I've never read any kind of Judith Butler or anything like that. I'm going into this, knowing nothing. And then literally every single video is just me going, just getting up a transgender meme or whatever, some kind of transgender poster or whatever, and just going, well, I don't understand that. Of course I don't. And who would find that entertaining? Goodness me.
Biological reality. I don't understand.
Yes. We know you don't understand. We know you don't understand biological reality. Okay.
Why that's used as an argument against trans people, because actually trans people are supported by science. It's just...
As somebody who's looked into this issue a lot, I've never actually seen any kind of science confirming the existence of man and woman essences. You understand that, right? There is no science on the ethereal manness or the ethereal womanness. You can look around for it. You're not going to find it, unfortunately. Biological reality. It's oh, here's the pancreas, here's the kidney, here's the magic woman essence, here's the magic man essence. Oh look, this person was assigned a woman at birth, but actually look, we found the magic man essence. We the scientists found the magic man essence. Look, it was here. We found it here, right underneath the appendix. Here it is. I found the man essence. Okay, don't worry, guys. Gender identity extremism confirmed with science. There is no science for magic man essences and magic woman essences. If you want to say that being transgender is what confirmed with science, the first thing you're going to have to do is explain what exactly it means to be transgender, and then you're going to have to go through the science relating to that. Is your argument that gender dysphoria has been proven by science? Okay, no one's denying that. What is your actual argument here? Because ultimately, let's clarify, the idea of being transgender is oh, you're a man in a woman's body, and the only way that could possibly make sense is to say there is some kind of, well, first of all, literally the fact that the man essence and the idea of being a man in a woman's body necessarily means that there is no biological reality to your manness, because if there was any kind of biological reality to the manness, then you wouldn't be in a woman's body, you'd be in a man's body. It's literally contradictory. It makes no sense. If you're going to say, oh, how can Jammidodger say that, hey, guess what? There is a biological basis for me being a man. Because if there was a biological basis for you being a man, you wouldn't be trans in the first place. The whole point is that there isn't a biological basis for you being a man. Goodness me.
Oh, is this the same Posey Parker that also goes by different names, or at least one other different name that also said these things?
I think when you decide that men can come into women's space, it's no longer a women's space. India obviously looks like a woman, but I don't see India as a woman.
Okay, yeah, so that's perfectly fine. The worst thing is, I think I've actually heard the Posey Parker has said some genuinely dodgy things. I saw some people on my Discord saying, oh, that they don't agree with Posey Parker because she's actually said some quite kind of, let's say, anti-feminist reactionary things. That's what I've heard. And I want to clarify, I don't know about that. That's what I've heard. Obviously, I don't really care about Posey Parker. It's just not, she's just not been on my radar at all. But if your argument is Posey Parker has said trans women aren't women, yeah, that's a completely, I hate this so much, because this is all Jammidodger can do, which is kind of sad. All Jammidodger can do is kind of just take it as kind of an axiomatic truth that saying trans women aren't women is bad, and not actually defending that position at all, which is just a kind of really sad situation to be in.
And it's just really highly transphobic and hiding it under the guise of some form of feminism.
Yeah, hold on a minute. So where exactly is the hiddenness, and where's the guise? Like, it doesn't even make any sense to me. Like, I'm so confused by this. Like, I don't get it. Because, hold on a minute. If saying that trans women aren't women is transphobic, then how is Posey Parker hiding that? Again, I don't know. Like, I'm not coming out here and saying like, I 100% agree with everything Posey Parker has said, because I'm not completely sure I do. But just based on what you've shown here, you're saying that saying trans women aren't women is transphobic, and you're also saying that Posey Parker is hiding her transphobia. But she isn't, because she's explicitly came out and said trans women aren't women. Like, she's been as explicit as you could possibly be in saying trans women aren't women. This is something which I notice all the time. These gender identity extremists have this idea that gender critical feminists are hiding their beliefs, even though like virtually no gender critical feminists are. Like, I've literally never met a gender critical feminist who has been reticent to come out and just say, yeah, trans women aren't women. Like, every single gender critical feminist who believes that, and there are some gender critical feminists who will say like, oh, some trans women are women, or some trans women are women but in a different sense. I mean, you know, it's debatable. I kind of call those people gender critical light, but every single gender critical feminist who believes trans women aren't women will come out and say that openly. So they're not trying to hide anything, one. And two, if you say Posey Parker is trying to hide something, how is it under a guise of feminism? What evidence do you have that Posey Parker is not feminist? If you have that evidence, then I did say before that I've seen other people on like my Discord imply like Posey Parker actually is maybe not somebody who feminists should be calling their allies, or their ally rather. She's not more than one person. Then sure, have the evidence. I think it's just funny that apparently my Discord is better at arguing this case than Jammidodger is.
Not cool. I can very much see why she has been banned from groups, seeing as being trans and gender identity is a protected characteristic. So if you discriminate against trans people, and if you're transphobic openly, then you may face some consequences.
Yeah, so basically it's just saying, yeah, like, yeah, we know. There's just Jammidodger being like, yeah, I can understand why this person was banned from this site, because being trans is something which you're not allowed to criticize. So if you have a disagreement with the way that trans people are defining gender identity, then you just have to not do that. You just can't have those opinions. You just can't think about things. Yeah, okay. That's horrifying. Like, this is like somebody coming out going like, yeah, I understand why this person was banned, because the Chinese Communist Party doesn't tolerate dissent. So if you're going to criticize the Chinese Communist Party, obviously you're going to be banned. Like, yeah, that's the problem. Like, oh, I understand why this person was banned, because you're not allowed to criticize gender identity extremism, because the idea that gender should be based in a material referent, which is biological reality, is like considered discrimination. So if you say that, you're probably going to get banned. Yeah. That's the problem.
For that. Trans rights are men's rights.
True.
The really strong running theme in a lot of transphobia, there's like, I feel like there's different stems of transphobia, right?
Oh, well done. Okay, you're finally like, I mean, you're still using the word transphobic, but I guess you're finally realizing that everybody who disagrees with you isn't one massive monolith. Baby steps. Baby steps, but you're getting there, Jammy. You're getting close to realizing that there are different reasons why somebody might disagree with you, and that labeling them all as transphobes is actually kind of stupid. Now you just need to stop dropping the label of transphobia every single opportunity you get, and maybe you will actually start to understand why some people disagree with you.
Right, and in this specific stem that is trying to hide it under some form of feminism,
like, how are you so ignorant? I don't know if you are this stupid, or if it's just that you're trying to kind of make your audience more stupid by not presenting them with the reality of the situation. It's like you're acting as if you've just discovered this idea of like, hey, there are transphobic people who call themselves feminists, like really confused by it, as if this isn't like a massive thing, as if this isn't like you've responded to J.K. Rowling before. You've pointed out J.K. Rowling. This isn't like some new thing. And yeah, like this is like a very common thing that basically, and it relates to the fact that obviously a lot of trans rights activists behave in a way that's very common to a lot of men's rights activists. A lot of the way that trans rights activists try and place trans rights in opposition to women's rights reminds a lot of feminists of how men's rights activists place men's rights in opposition to women's rights. That's the comparison. And I would probably disagree with the idea maybe that trans rights are men's rights in so many terms, but I would say trans rights activists are functionally men's rights activists. They are very similar just in terms of every aspect of them. It's pretty much identical. And, you know, I was somebody who kind of first got into YouTube when the whole men's rights activism thing was really like a serious thing. And I'm seeing the exact same kind of mentality from trans rights activists. You know, they are very similar things, and I'm perfectly fine with somebody saying they're the same thing. But just the ignorance of being like, there seems to be some people who are against trans rights and also feminists. Yeah, well done.
It's all about hating on trans women and invalidating trans women. But by doing that, trans men are completely ignored, and it really just...
Yeah, why might feminists care more about the situation of men encroaching upon women's spaces than the reverse? And obviously there are plenty of, you know, you don't have to search long and hard to find gender critical feminists who are also concerned about the situation of trans identified females. But yes, lots of feminists are much more concerned about males in relation to women's spaces and women's rights and women's identity because they're feminists. Like the very fact that kind of, like I say, the relationship between male people and the women's spaces and women's identities is the main focus is precisely evidence that the feminism in question here is sincere.
Gender refers to the stereotypical roles that are forced on men and women. No one has gender identities, we all just have bodies and personalities. I don't have a gender identity because my personality is not a set of stereotypes.
Okay, this is a fun one. I'm interested to see how Jammy responds to this, because this is very relevant to some videos I made recently. I pointed out that I don't really agree with this way of defining gender. So let's see how Jammy responds.
This is just getting really, really confused between gender roles and expression and then gender identity. Gender identity is a separate thing. Your gender is a genuine thing. I'm not saying everybody has to inherently feel like they have one or feel like they have one separate to their assigned sex, because I guess if you never have to think about it and you don't want to think about it, then why would you feel like there are any two distinct things going on with that within yourself? But trans people do have to think about it, and there is evidence to support that our gender identity and birth sex are different things, and they are separate and they can be different, hence trans people.
So first of all, yeah, like I kind of suspected, this resulted in a lot of like talking past each other, which is precisely the issue I have with just coming out and saying like gender equals gender stereotypes and gender roles. I think it just is inevitably going to lead to people pointing out like, well, that's not how I understand gender, and then you've like literally achieved nothing. But yeah, the point being that now obviously Jammy's argument has to be that gender identity is this thing that exists, and that it in some way validates your claim to actually be a man or woman. And obviously there is no argument presented for that, because there just is no argument for that. So yeah, long story short, it's kind of, I mean, that's just a microcosm of why I think it's just easier to accept the language of gender identity, because the point is you can say, okay, let's talk about gender identity. Why does your gender identity determine what gender you are? And then you can have that conversation, rather than having the conversation kind of stall as you insist that gender is sexist stereotypes, and then the person responding to you says, well, I don't think that at all, and then you haven't achieved anything. That's kind of my belief. Again, this relates to a video I made like a few days ago, which I'm going to be doing a clarifying vid to at some point. I already recorded it. It's just like I keep having other things I need to respond to. But yeah, like that's kind of my belief.
I mean, like, you're the one really, really pushing stereotypes there by saying like, oh, you're a bit masculine, which means you must be a man.
Well, it's not about being masculine. Okay, this is confusing masculinity in terms of like, and this should be a really obvious thing, but masculinity in terms of like actions and behaviors and stereotypes versus masculinity in terms of like physicality. Yeah, they're not the same thing, in the exact same way that it's completely different to talk about kind of racial stereotypes versus simply saying like black people have dark skin. It's not a stereotype to say black people have dark skin. It's
because trans women aren't men. They don't become women. They start living as the women they are. So, yeah, cool. Nice one. A Venn diagram. Being a man, being a lesbian. Again, trans women who are lesbians are not men. So, okay. And
yeah, I mean, this is just an example of, I guess, to be fair, it should be pointed out that I talk about like people talking past each other. it's true that talking past each other to an extent is inevitability with this thing, but I think it shows that you don't really have any arguments where your main goal or your main strategy is, rather than presenting arguments, just lean into the misunderstanding. Just be like, rather than actually engaging with the argument, just be like, yeah, because trans women are not men, so there we go, that's the argument. Like, yeah, I mean, I guess that's one way to completely avoid having to defend your actual beliefs.
Can I take hormones and change my sex? Sure, you know best. 1, we do not question whether cisgender kids know their gender identity, so why not...
Well, oh my goodness me. What? Ah, goodness me. First of all, there's just like no equivalence between being cis and being trans. One of them, like being cis, isn't like a thing. It's only a thing because being trans is a thing. If being trans wasn't a thing, it wouldn't be like everyone would still be walking around saying, oh, I'm cis. No, like being cis is like the default position. So trying to draw an equivalence between our treatment of cis people and our treatment of trans people is just really stupid because, like I say, conceptually, the idea of being cis only exists because the idea of being trans exists. So then there's obviously the fact that the kind of body changes that a cis person will experience are the natural body changes that are supposed to happen anyway, and not some kind of medical treatment, which is a relatively new phenomenon where we don't exactly know all the long-term consequences of it, and certainly it will irrevocably change your body forever.
Treat trans kids in the same way. Also, no 5-year-old would ever receive any kind of hormones. It does not happen at that age. So
yeah, I probably do agree this is true. Like, I think this is an exaggerated example, but I think the issue is that lots of people are concerned that this could become the case, and that's not really a slippery slope thing. It's just pointing out, if you are going to say like, oh, children need to be able to take puberty blockers and things like that, you need to be able to explain why you are saying, like, drawing the line there and saying like children need to be taking puberty blockers, rather than saying like drawing the line somewhere else. Because if you're not able to explain why you're drawing the line there and not somewhere else, then people are naturally going to wonder, well, hold on a minute, what is, why does that mean that the line isn't necessarily going to be drawn at some point further down the line? That's kind of like the point. Like, if you come out and say like, oh yeah, children should be able to have puberty blockers at the age of 10 that will irrevocably and irreversibly delay their puberty and potentially have like long-term physical side effects. Again, it's kind of a relatively new phenomenon. It's not, something which we completely understand. If you're going to be able to say that, then people might ask, well, are you saying that because that's what you actually believe, or are you saying that because that's what you think is a step towards achieving what you want to achieve? And it's very reasonable to ask that question. Like a lot of the time when somebody's saying something, yes, it's a very valid question to say, is this your genuine beliefs that you 100% hold to, or is it this is your belief right now as a stepping stone to your actual beliefs, which are more extreme? Perfectly legitimate kind of line of inquiry.
This is just very wrong and pushing a false narrative to scare people into thinking that like the trans are taking over and they're transing the kids really young and putting them on hormones and making them have surgery. It's just not happening like that.
Well, again, puberty blockers is an actual thing that has been like confirmed as happening to young children, prepubescent children. So yeah, it's not exactly exaggerated. Sure, this is maybe something looking towards a potential future people are afraid about. But yeah, it's not something where people are saying, well, I guess this exact thing isn't happening right now. But the point is, so what? That's not really a good reason to not oppose what seems to be some steps that could very logically lead to the situation in a short amount of time.
That was everything for that topic. What did you think?
I thought that it was not a very good video. Again, I think I'm going to try not to return back to this channel for a while, especially since I think I pretty much just covered, like, I basically gave the go-to response by pointing out that what we have here is somebody who has intentionally not engaged with any ideas that challenge their own beliefs about gender, not engaged with any gender critical theory, and is literally just looking at memes and then going, well, I don't understand why they would say that. Yeah, no shit. You don't understand why people would say that because you're... well, you're ignorant. That's it. That's what it is. It's ignorance. It's pure unbridled ignorance. And unsurprisingly, a video about peak trans by somebody who admits they'd never heard of the term peak trans and is actually basing everything off of one Facebook group. Unsurprisingly, lots of ignorance. Isn't that shocking? And again, I guess, you know what this kind of ignorance about women's concerns reminds me of? Men's rights activism. I guess it's true what they say. Trans rights are men's rights. Anyway, that's the end of the video. Please do like and subscribe. Again, I'm aiming for 3 videos a week now because I've realized I can do these videos and I do quite enjoy doing them. I think you guys enjoy them at least a little bit too. So I figure, why not do 3? I mean, it works out quite well. Let's say I have hit my latest goal on Patreon. So my latest goal was to read and react to every single chapter of the Transgender Studies Reader. And I'm going to be hopefully trying to get a video relating to that out next week. So that'll be really good. I will just say, obviously, if you give more money on Patreon, that's great. There are other goals, and I'm going to go into them. But yeah, you can check it out and see what it is. But yeah, thank you so much for everyone who's given money so far. And thank you for, liking, subscribing, sharing. Please do comment. Just do everything. You're all so appreciated. And I'll just say thank you to my current patrons: Hannah, Kirsten, Stephen, Nancy, Rubble, Lizu, Jessica, Constant, Adriana, Harper, Alex, Leica, Jane, George, Katie, Ryan, Vishnuvius, That Feminist, Lily, Emily, Frederico A, Evan, Philip, Anna, Sophie, Jamie, Lena, Julie, Dustin, Rashmi, Marion, BJ, Joshua, Marina, Sam, Sarah, Valerie, Kathleen, Jelena, Dork, Alexandra, Emma, Christina, Owen, Sarah, Ibishka. You're all very appreciated.